Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to the CM Mentors podcast. My name is Matt Graves. My co-host each week is Kyle Grandell. What's up, Kyle? How are you, man?
Hey, doing pretty good, Matt. Just on the road traveling again, so trying to keep my head above water here. How about you?
Man, can you believe next week is Halloween?
No, it's not.
I assume it's going to be Halloween by the time this thing airs. So,
well, that would explain the confusion. But yeah, in that case, holy cow, I can't believe it. That's crazy.
The year has flown by. It's Christmas already. Can you believe it?
It is 2025 after all. So
anyway, we got a fun episode today. I say fun. Yeah. It's going to be an interesting one. It's all about insurance.
Yeah, it's going to be really great. Topic that is really prevalent in the industry. I would say it's very, very misunderstood. And I think that most people that get involved with it don't necessarily know what they're getting into unless they have some of the expertise. And I would say I fell into that trap myself.
It's, insurance is one of those things, and I'm going to say this before Shea gets on the thing, so she can't defend herself, but it's it's one of those things that's, I don't know, it's almost useless 99% of the time, right? But the 1% of the time you actually need it, like it is like the most valuable thing in the world. So
no, it's huge. And I mean, especially when you get into expanding your client base too, there's different requirements and different needs and policies and clauses and types. And it's so overwhelming, and it can be so confusing too, just to make sure you have the right policies in place, let alone the limits, and actually understand what you're even getting.
Yeah. I mean, if you're not used to we're doing all this before she gets on here, so I'm sure we'll get into it. But yeah, if you don't know what you're looking at, you can definitely get yourself into a lot of trouble.
Yeah. So. Yeah, exactly. So to introduce her really quick, so we have Shea Fuller coming on to join us. So she's a client executive with Holmes Murphy Insurance Agency. She specializes in contract policies. Comes to us from the University of Iowa with a BA in marketing, as well as Minnesota State University BA in business administration. Go Minnesota. And she's also a basketball fan, so hell yeah to that too. So let's bring her on.
Hello.
Welcome.
How are you?
I'm great. Thank you guys for having me. Matt, I giggled in the background when you said that insurance is fun. I've never had an introduction. I know you're joking, but I've never had an introduction say that insurance is going to be fun to talk about. So that was great.
I didn't want to lose the audience before you even came on the screen. So right. I had to keep it interesting.
Keep it fun. We'll keep it light.
We'll do our best.
Yeah, whoever's still on now, make sure you stay on a little bit longer.
So. Right.
So one thing we like to do to get started here, although Kyle ruined it last week, was just jump right into some getting to know you questions, and then kind of ice break, kind of get to know you a little bit more, and then we'll get into all the good stuff. So kind of when you're not talking insurance, what's your favorite thing to do to unwind or recharge?
So you did say I'm a basketball fan, a huge sports fan, so I love watching any and all things sports. I am one of 4 girls as well, so we always have some good banter and some competition on the pickleball court as well. So huge pickleball fan, huge sports fan, and love to go boating with the family.
Awesome. If you could, we got pickleball paddles, but we've never even got them out of the bag yet. Maybe we'll do that when it cools down. Anyway, if you could time travel to witness the construction of any project in history, what would you choose?
Oh, gosh. I would like to see a football stadium. I don't have a specific one. Maybe the Vikings, just because I'm the closest to the Viking Stadium. And I know you guys are Minnesota lovers. So
yes, we both are.
Brownie points there.
Oh, we are.
But probably a football stadium.
It's a cool project. There's a cool stadium.
No, it's super cool. So I was there just for one game of Vikings and Packers, like the first year it was open. But I mean, the stadium, anybody who doesn't know, it's shaped like a Viking ship. It's super cool. And it's humongous too. I mean, I don't know how it ranks, but like when you're in the stadium, it just feels huge. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I've never been. That's on the bucket list.
Gotta go.
Well, Kyle's going to have to take us one day. He's being selfish.
Right.
I'm here now. I'm waiting for you. Let's go.
What's your go-to habit to start the day right?
Making my bed and then making my coffee in the morning.
In that order or the other order?
That order, actually.
I need the coffee before I can do the bed.
Okay.
let's see. What's the most unexpected lesson you've learned kind of about construction through this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say it's all centered around safety. So I like to go back to the sports term that I was told all the time when I kind of got a little upset or mad. My coaches would always say, control what you can control. And there's a lot of unexpected events, especially in the sports and the construction industry. Accidents happen. And so controlling what you are able to control and keeping a level head through it all.
I love it.
That's a great way to look at things. Huge in business, just in general. By the way,
Yeah.
That one's really big. Keeping an eye on control, because you can drive crazy with stuff that you just have no control over.
Right.
So that was kind of the icebreaker. Give us so who's Shea? Give us a little bit of background for people who don't know you.
Yep. So I grew up in West Des Moines, Iowa. Went to school at Valley, if we have any Iowa fans. And then went off to school and played basketball at Minnesota State University in Mankato for 2 years, and then transferred over to the University of Iowa, home of Caitlin Clark. And then in my time at Iowa, I needed an internship. So I said, I want to do something with sales, have no idea what I want to do. Never once did I think it was insurance. And so came to Holmes Murphy for an internship and landed the spot where I was exactly where I needed to be. So I met the best people, the best opportunities here, and really fell in love with it. So that's kind of where I ended up at Holmes Murphy, started shortly after graduating from Iowa, and then have been here since. So that's a little nugget on me.
So do y'all concentrate mostly in the construction industry or?
Yep. So we have a construction team that is a big majority of our property and casualty team. And a lot of them are centered out of our Minneapolis office as well. But we do have a property and casualty division that is generalist. So we do any and everything. We do personal lines as well. And then we have an employee benefits team. So all things benefits. And then have a captive subsidiary. So it's called Innovative Captive Strategies as well. So we do a lot here at Holmes, but I focus in the construction space.
Are there any certain industries that you do or don't work in, or is there anything that like, do you stay away from residential, for example, or anything like that?
We do it all.
Okay.
Yep, we do it all.
Sure.
So I know, Alex, I'm almost thrown off here because he gave me a whole checklist of all these questions. And so I'm trying to go to the questions. But no, I like to pick him. He's laughing in the background. That's my favorite part about having a producer. But no, when's the best time to get an insurance agent involved in a project?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it's never too early to get your agent involved. We like to say before you even sign a contract, we want to be there in the process and in the weeds with you when you do when those contracts requirements do come in. Because let's, for example, see a general contractor has 10 different subs working on a project. One of these subs has 100 different employees and they do excavation. Another sub comes in has 2 employees and they do electrical work, but they're being presented the same exact contract. So we want to be here as your agent or your broker and help you on your behalf and say, these limits are not reasonable for a 2-man shop, electrical company. It's A, too expensive for you guys to cover, or B, you probably don't need these kinds of limits. So we think that it's never too early and almost right when you get your contract to get your agent involved, so that they can be your consultant or advisor throughout the whole process.
Are there certain situations you've seen where you were brought in a little bit too late, and maybe you have an example of how that was really detrimental to the customer?
Yeah. So when you think of an effective date, we want to be brought in well before that time, because again, contracts come into play, negotiations come into play. We have thousands of different markets that we will approach for you guys to find unique insurance solutions. And so we want to make sure that we have ample amount of time to put together the specific and right program for your type of construction company and activity and exposure. So we like to at least have, and I'm going to say this with some grace because I know it's not always doable, but about a month ahead of time. That way we have a lot of leeway time and get everything squared away before we do come too close to that effective or project start date. So as soon as you do have an idea or a contract or a project lined up, get your agent involved. It's never too early to get them involved, but sometimes it is too late. When you bring them in the week of and you say, hey, we have XYZ limits that we need to have, XYZ coverage that we need to have, is this doable? Sometimes it's not. So get your agent involved as early as possible, is the advice that I have there.
When you say effective date or project start date, is that when you have boots on the ground, or is that like basically when you execute the contract?
Yep. So effective date would be the date that your insurance renews every single year. So you'll probably have your basic general liability, workers' comp, auto insurance that's going to automatically renew every single year. Now you may have some project specific insurance requirements that you need to have or coverages that you need to have. So we could put that into place for the time being. But most of the effective date is going to be automatically renewing each and every year at the same time. So a lot of times it's January 1st, so 1/1/2024, that will renew 2025.
Got it. Well, and that all makes sense. And then, so I mean, as the companies are getting involved with their policies, do you have some key aspects that might be really critical, important to understand?
Yeah, so it's really important. Well, I guess in the construction industry as a whole, it really depends on your project, it depends on your location, and it depends on the roles that you're playing in that project. So it's hard to pinpoint exactly what key coverages you may need because it's different for each and every one of your construction companies. But a big thing to look out for are exclusions in your policies. So it's important for you to work through with your broker to say, hey, we do excavation work or we do project managing on these types of projects. What are our exposures? And then, hey, how do we get covered? An example I love to give is I had a call with an excavation company out of Colorado, and they say, hey, would you be able to take a look at our coverage? We're an excavation company that partakes in sewer repair and replacement in the commercial space. And I said, absolutely. So they sent over their liability policy. I went straight to their exclusions and I read residential exclusion. And so I called them up and I said, do you guys partake in any business in the residential space? Do you do any sewer repair in the residential space? They say every once in a while for friends, family. And when we're not busy in the commercial space, we'll do a project or two. And I said, well, I don't think you're aware that you do have a residential exclusion. So every project or anything accident that were to happen or arise when you're operating in the residential space, you're paying out of pocket. You do not have coverage for. And that happens more often than not. All general liability policies are different in the construction space. Some may have specific throw-in exclusions. And it's really important to look through your exclusions to make sure that your operations are covered. And your broker should be a really good partner in that as well. And then again, here with key aspects, it goes back to the contracts. We had, and I'll give another example for this one. We had a client that's a subcontractor of a large DC, and they were out on the job site, and one of their employees was working and had lost a limb while working on the job site. So that individual is receiving workers' compensation payouts from the injury, but they brought in an attorney who came in and said, let's sue this general contractor. Let's say that they didn't have a really safe environment on the job site and that caused the accident. Well, the general contractor is going to point back to that contract and say, hey, look at what we put into place and that you signed at the beginning of this project saying that you're going to protect the general contractor from any liabilities that may arise during this project. So then this flips back and this lawsuit is back on your employer and is paying out the legal fees and the defense costs and everything that's associated with that. So there's a lot of verbiage in contracts. So you need to pay attention with that, as well as limits and coverages, and protect your employers and your assets. So those are kind of key aspects. It's hard to pinpoint exactly because it's different for each and every construction company, but just some big points there.
it's kind of crazy. You're talking about, the commercial company that was doing just one-off residential stuff. It's like, if you don't really paying attention to what you're doing, you're thinking like, oh, we're slow. Let's just go over here and help this guy out over here. And you can just create a huge liability just for, just picking up, some downtime work or doing something if you're not careful.
Yeah, exactly. And those claims are more expensive than you think as well. So if you think you hit a water line in the residential area, I mean, that claim is going to pay out pretty well, and you don't have any coverage for that. So there goes a lot of money out of pocket that you didn't think, or you thought that you had coverage for.
Mm-hmm.
Just the thought of that's got me sweating over here. So
Right.
I can only imagine, but
that's
I mean,
my job, Kyle.
Yeah, make me sweat.
Sweating.
Right.
You're hired.
Right.
Well, and also too, I mean, just another point that you made there, Shea. I mean, every company is different, but also, I mean, even the customers these companies work for are different too. I mean, I think I'd have to ask Morgan or Alex in the background here, but I think we've rewritten our policy 3 or 4 times this year because we've gotten new customers, and even the same customer at a different location. It's like, oh yeah, we have a different requirement, and now we have a different requirement. It's just so finding all of those different exclusions, especially every time you have to go back and revisit a policy, it can be really daunting if you don't have a good partner to work with.
Right. So we like to say that it's important for you construction companies to have a construction specific broker, because what we look at every single day are these contract requirements or the project requirements. And we know that you work with 10, 20, 30 different contract holders throughout the year, and you could have 10, 20, 30 different requirements that you need to carry each year. So you need to have somebody that's on their toes and able to help you grow and move through what is required of you throughout the year.
Huge.
I want to ask a question. So I think everyone kind of understands what general liability is and that sort of stuff. But there's all these new things that we're seeing, like cybersecurity. Like, can you explain cybersecurity and like why is it so damn expensive?
That's a great question. So we are seeing cyber being a huge issue within these last couple of years. And I don't know where we got this statistic from, but it was about a third or a fourth of all the claim payouts last year regarding cyber in 2023 were contractors. So if you think about, all
cybersecurities or cybersecurity payouts in basically America,
I think so, but don't quote me on that.
So basically, all of them combined, a third of them are contractors.
Yes, and if you think about this, so all the wire transfers that you guys do, or all the ACH payments that you do for materials, or you're signing contracts, whatever it is, unfortunately, the reality of it is that people are getting really good at hacking, scamming, or phishing a lot of your employees into thinking that you are paying the correct person or you're clicking on the right link. They're getting really good at manipulating people into giving away sensitive information, payment information that perform actions to compromise your security. And this is called all covered under social engineering, but you think about phishing emails. I mean, an example, we had somebody that clicked on an email link, was completing a wire transfer and paid the wrong person $1 million. They didn't have cybersecurity in place, and so they're paying that $1 million. They don't get that $1 million back, and that shuts down their entire security program, and they are out of business for a couple of weeks, months, whatever it is, to get the program back up and running again. But cyber is a huge issue in today's world that we're dealing with, and you don't think that you need it until you need it, and that's kind of insurance as a whole. But yeah, cyber is a huge issue in today's world.
Well, and maybe not even so much payment things, but it also, I would imagine maybe some coverages don't have it, but it's also intended for like information as well, right? So like, for example, for our company, working with a lot of Fortune 500 manufacturers, like the confidential information, the proprietary things, that's where my biggest worry is, because I don't even know how you put dollars to that. And so
Exactly.
I'm out of business tomorrow if that happens.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yep. That is a huge problem. You think of hospitals as well, when they have all of their patient information, social security numbers for financial planners, advisors. Cyber is a huge, huge issue in today's world. It's becoming more prevalent, and it's unfortunate to say that people are getting really good at performing as a hacker, phisher, or whatever it is, but is something to perk our ears up and say, hey, this is an issue. What are we going to do about it?
Man, that's why I'm still blown away by the third of them all are contractors.
I'm gonna send you a link of where we found this,
please
yeah,
do.
it's crazy to think about.
We're going down a rabbit hole here, but I guess it's because like in construction and contractors, there's so much stuff happening, so many people paying different people. Maybe contractors aren't the most sophisticated when it comes to their checks and balances, and it's just, I guess it's easier to manipulate, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you a question here, something else that's kind of on the mind. It's really about project planning. And, we talked a little bit earlier about coming in early enough on a project to be able to make a difference, especially when it comes to that effective date. And so do you have any tips, tricks, things like that for, for when, kind of how having that insurance coverage can really influence good planning and budgeting and overall, even for the business?
Yeah. Well, I will say with budgeting, insurance costs is like most businesses' third largest expense, And so budgeting comes into play huge, especially for these new venture or newer construction companies that don't really think about the cost of insurance or what they're going to need in order to suffice for these contract requirements. So budgeting is really, really huge. And that's when it's essential for them to bring in a broker and an agent and say, hey, we're thinking about taking on XYZ for projects. What are you thinking budget-wise, or what should we set aside, or how should we plan? What do you think coverages we should put in place right now for what our thought is for what we're going to be doing or performing? And then, again, it's different for everybody, so I can't give specific examples, but we can help get the right coverages in place and advise throughout that project of the onboarding and the working through projects, so on and so forth. So it's huge. It's hard to say without like having a specific example, but budgeting is huge, and including insurance in your budgeting plan is what we really love to see, and is what we see the most success in with construction companies.
Definitely. Well, and do you have any common mistakes that you see firms make when they're selecting policies and maybe getting into projects without working with you first?
Yeah. So problems that we see is thinking that the cheapest quote option is the best. And I know that's not what you really want to hear, but is the easiest answer, and what we hear 90% of the time is that we just want a cheaper option. We want a cheaper quote, but that cheaper quote probably has 10 times the amount of exclusions and doesn't have the amount of coverage that would, suffice for all of your exposures that you do have on the job site. Our jobs as insurance professionals are to make sure that we get you covered as much as you need to be. And so sometimes we understand that price is a huge, huge deal, and we want to help and negotiate on your behalf. But we also think it's super important that we are identifying each of your exposure and getting coverages put in place that identify each of your risk and exposure. So price is a huge, huge one. Another one would be thinking that you need to shop your insurance program every single year. We have relationships with a lot of different carriers. And if we were to send, let's use XYZ Contracting, for example. If we were to send XYZ Contracting to the same carrier every single year saying, I know you don't write it right now, but please provide a quote. We want a really cheap option. They're going to say, we saw this the last 10 years. We spent 50 hours on it. You've never once used our quote. You have wasted our time. You've wasted our energy, and we're not going to be competitive on it this year because we know we're not going to win it again year 11, 12, 13. So it's almost like it's a relationship business is what we like to say. We want to bring your XYZ Contracting to their desk and say, hey, provide a quote. You're going to be really competitive, or we want you to be really competitive. We're going to 2 other options and provide us your best. And then we'll negotiate with other contractors from there. So another misconception is thinking that you need to shop your insurance program every year, because sometimes it ruins relationships and it gets carriers off your slate.
how often should you shop it out?
What we see as best practice, and it's different for everybody, because if you receive a really large, increase year after year, or this year, and we just place you somewhere else last year, we'll shop you again. We'll go market you again. But best practice is probably to market your account probably every 3 years. Again, it's different depending on the type of company that we're working with. But we like to at least send it out every 3 years just to keep our markets honest, and see if we are up to date with your exposures and make sure that we have the correct price and correct coverage in place. And it's pretty competitive with what we're seeing in the marketplace.
You were talking a minute ago about the cheapest option. I was just thinking of, like, I don't even know what it was, Next Insurance or something like that. Those little commercials that would always pre-roll on YouTube. The guy on his ladder pulling up to a house and like, I could have a certificate of insurance, and in 5 minutes he's got it. And I always wondered, like, what happens if you fall off that ladder? Like, is that really going to cover you? Like, there's probably
right. Yeah, and with a lot of those insurance companies that say you can get a coverage in 5 minutes, you're not talking face to face to an agent. They're not understanding your exposures. You're just talking to a computer that's saying, do you do this, this, and this? Yes or no? And then you get a general policy that probably, again, has everything that you're doing excluded. So it's really important to talk face to face with an agent or a broker and say, hey, we're doing a project, an excavation project. What are you seeing? What exposures do we have? What coverage should we get in place? So those commercials do make us laugh on the brokerage side of saying, well, that's probably not, you're fooling everybody. It's probably not the best solution. But just be careful with moving forward with those types of company, just to make sure you are covered where you need to be.
Yeah. I was going to say, I guess it's better than having no insurance, but if it's a false sense of security, you may be better off with no insurance.
Right. Because you might be paying for nothing. Right.
Exactly.
Well, and kind of before we leave the topic of like coverage and getting policies in place, do you see any industry trends right now, Shea, of things that, maybe that writers or underwriters are not, maybe being really strict on policies right now, or anything in the industry that's kind of like evolving and stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, what we are experiencing right now that's really tough is property. The property market's really, really tough. And that's just because if you were to turn on the news and see the wind, hail storms, the wildfires, the tornadoes, the hurricanes coming through, with property insurance, there's nothing really you can do preventative wise to make sure that that's not going to happen. But we do talk about general liability, workers' compensation a lot in the construction industry. And one thing that we really want to bring to attention is working with a broker that gets ahead of the workers' compensation and general liability claims, and is more so proactive and not reactive. So we have, working with an agency, we have risk and safety professionals that will go out to your job site and learn how you operate and learn your history on workers' compensation claims, learn on your industry, your specific industries, as a nation, what the last 3 to 5 years had looked like in that industry. For maybe it was slips, trips, and falls with an excavation company, or maybe it's the lead cause was ankle strains jumping out of the equipment. So we'll look at that, and then we'll have our risk and safety team come out and say, okay, well, when you're getting down, use this to get down. That way we prevent the ankle strains, or let's keep this clean, or let's have this safe environment put into place, so we can mitigate and not have these slips, trips, and falls and not fall into the industry standard. So it's more than just working with an agency to place coverage. It's also, we have other tools such as loss control or risk management strategies that can add value as well. And then what else was I going to say here? Identifying potential hazards. Identifying potential hazards is also really great to help us advise construction companies to take proactive measures to reduce the likelihood of claims as well. So we think safety is a huge part in the construction industry, and want to get ahead of that and be proactive instead of reactive.
One thing, I've worked for a few different companies kind of coming up through my career, and like most companies, they don't really educate their employees, like project manager level people, like on what insurance really is. It's just like I call my office, says, hey, my contract says I need a COI for this. I give them the contract, and then something happens, and then send me a form, and I don't ever really understand what I'm even looking at or talking about. But like there's until the company I'm with now, we've done a bunch of insurance trainings and really understanding what it is we're looking at. And I see there's a huge value and in that, because obviously you know what you're looking at, you know what you're reading, you understand what your limitations are and all that sort of stuff. So that's something do you guys work with your clients on training and stuff?
We do a lot. First, I'll talk about a resource that we do have. It's an online training platform it's almost like a library of resources for our clients to use and to send to their employees to say, hey, every Friday morning, you have to watch this video. It's a toolbox talk on what you should be seeing or expecting safety wise. We think it's really important to have our clients educate their employees all behind the safety factor. We want their employees to be safe and have a safe work environment. And also that just helps with the mental health and well-being of the employees as well. And that's huge in the construction industry. And you talked about the project supervisor. We want to work with the project supervisor as well to make sure that they're aware of what they need to be managing and reporting and taking care of on a job site. So we want them and your safety coordinator to be working hand in hand with our risk and safety individual on our insurance agency side as partners, so they can have really good relationships, be able to bounce ideas off of one another, and honestly just keep it as safe as a work environment as possible.
Yeah, well, and especially if you're somebody, and I would say, on the employee level that maybe is not directly getting involved with the policies as much, it can be really tough to get the exposure you need to really understand what's going on behind the scenes. Because, like we've already talked about several times over this, so many different policies, different requirements, and the exclusions, like you said. I mean, it could be detrimental, obviously, to a project to not understand what's excluded if you're taking on work.
Yeah, well, what's excluded, and also your workers' compensation. Your employees are the ones out there on the field that have the potential to get injured, and then that's going to drive up your workers' compensation claims as well. And so we want your employees out in the field operating, but we want them to operate safe. So educating them on safety is a huge part of insurance, and you wouldn't think about it, but that is the main driver in the construction industry and insurance. Are they operating safe? Are their employees trained? And are they doing exactly what they need to be doing on the job site?
I'm envisioning this thing going back to that commercial and residential exclusion, where your frontline guys out there, in the field. I mean, not only is there a safety risk, but there's also, all these other liabilities they can put the company in, where maybe they're working on a commercial project, everything's good, but the project owner says, hey, can you not come over here and just dig a little hole by my house, right, and do this for me real quick? And they say, yeah, no problem. We'll go over there, trying to, do good customer service, go spend 30 minutes doing something. They hit something, and next thing you know, well, now they've switched to a residential project, and everyone wants to say you're not covered, and then fully understanding the risks associated with the work that they're doing is exactly. They think they're doing something great, and in retrospect, it could put the whole company out of business.
Right. Yeah. And some of those conversations can be simple with your broker. It can be, hey, we are thinking about taking on a couple projects in the residential space. Right. What do you advise? And it'll be, yeah, let me talk to that market and just see if we can get that exclusion removed. Now, it's not always that simple, but it starts a conversation. We have options, and there are things that we can do that we're not going to limit what you guys can do in the construction space. We're not going to limit you from doing residential work, but what we are going to do is make sure that you're covered when you do so.
Yeah.
Well, and before we leave you were talking about work comp a minute ago here. Before you leave that, do you have any good examples of either good or bad ones of situations that you've been involved with regarding work comp claims? I'm just curious, because that one's such a huge one, obviously.
Before you get into that, can you explain what workman's comp is? Because I think there's a big misconception. Like, people don't really understand what it does.
Yeah. So all of your employees that are on the job, if you were to get injured while on the job, you would have workers' compensation payout. So every company that has employees is required to carry workers' compensation coverage. If your said employee gets injured on the job, then you have workers' compensation payouts come from your insurance. Now, each claim will drive your premiums up year after year. So we want to, as your broker, to help you, again, be proactive instead of reactive. Make sure that what your employees are doing, we want to make sure that it's safe and that they know and are well trained on what they're doing. So to help make sure that there's not claims happening. One thing when it comes to workers' compensation, and one thing that we track on the brokerage side is lag time. And I think it's really important to educate you guys as well, is lag time is how long it takes for your employee who is injured to report to the supervisor or to the office in days. And then how long did it take for that said supervisor or the office to report it to your broker or the insurance company? Because the longer that it takes, the more expensive that claim is going to be. So let's give a really simple example here. If we have somebody on the job site and he tweaks his ankle, he didn't report it, didn't say a thing. He thinks that he can work through it and it's fine. Well, 4 days go by and he's on the job site again. He tweaks it again and ends up breaking his ankle and has to have surgery. And he's out for 4 or 5 months with surgery. Now that cost of that claim just skyrocketed because we didn't report it at the very beginning of when that time happened. B, when we would have kept it at an ankle strain and we could have replaced that employee somewhere else on the job site where he wouldn't have had an exposure to really roll his ankle, or could have done some computer or logging work. And then C, now we have to pay out the surgery cost. We have to pay out the return to work. And the time that he's out of work, we have to pay his salary. So it's important for us to educate you guys of report whatever it is. If let's say that ankle strain didn't go anywhere and you didn't actually have to pay a claim, that's great. But we put him in a separate place so that injury didn't go anywhere further. So that's a huge thing for us to help educate you guys on in the workers' compensation space of, are we taking care of injuries as soon as possible and as fast as possible to make sure that things don't progress and get worse?
And I mean, I know from experience too, unfortunately, that those cases can go from just a work comp case to something else, and it can grow, and before you know it, you can actually have a whole host of things that
exactly
paying out.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Did you get your question answered, Kyle, before I interrupted you?
Well, I was trying, but you keep interrupting me, Matt. So as per usual. No, very good. Very good.
What are some other, we talked about, we're kind of bouncing all over the place, but my mind's like,
that's all right.
My mind actually runs when it comes to insurance because I just started bouncing, thinking everything. So we talked about cybersecurity a minute ago as kind of a new trend or whatever. Is there any other new trends of new insurances that people need to be paying attention to and buying?
I wouldn't call it new, but there is like a pollution liability or professional liability that people that aren't experienced in the insurance space don't think that they need. And we don't need to get way too into the weeds because there's so many different insurance coverages that you probably have no idea that you could probably get. Our job is to identify your biggest exposure and make sure that you're covered for it. And so maybe that's cyber and general liability, workers' compensation for our construction companies. But it's all up for conversation. And this will get brought up with your broker when the time comes. The biggest conversation is for us to understand what is going on with your business. What are you guys doing? What's your biggest exposures? And what did your past look like with claims experience? And then moving forward, how can we make sure that everything that could arise will be paid out with insurance? So it's hard to pinpoint exactly a specific coverage, a newer coverage. One thing that's what we're seeing a lot of in the construction space is that, and I want to get my notes pulled up so I say this correctly.
We say stuff wrong all the time. Don't worry about it.
Well, Matt's really good at saying stuff.
Yeah.
I make up statistics. So
what I was going to say was just making sure a lot of times we have to adjust like limits or coverages. Very easy to do, but just more so need to have the conversation with your agent to make sure that gets taken care of. And then what we are seeing a lot of in the industry right now is like OSHA is kind of cracking down and is doing, there's a lot more OSHA visits going on. And we want to make sure and help prepare you for those OSHA visits. And there's questions that we want to put in your head of, do you have physical hazards that would point out to OSHA if they were to come onto your site? Or what does your record keeping look like? Or are you in compliance with OSHA standards? So that's one thing in the construction industry that we're seeing more recent than not. And also job site safety requirements are getting tighter as well. So it's important or to budget for personal protection equipment or a fleet safety manual or return to work programs. There's a lot more requirements on a job site now than there were ever before. Again, that's for safety. And we appreciate that, but just something to keep on the front of your mind.
So how does having like a good safety, I mean, I know if you have a good safety record, right, your insurance comes down because your EMR and all that, but how does like having a good safety manual and good safety, like, I've seen a lot of people switch to the new hard hats or from the old hard hats to the helmets and all that sort of stuff. Does that all play into kind of the insurance company's assessment of your risk and you can get lower premiums?
It does. I wouldn't say that guarantees that you have a lower premium, but I would say if you, let's think on the ladder of not having those hard hats or not having the personal protection or safety programs put into place, nobody is going to want to cover or no carrier is going to want to cover you for a cheaper premium if you don't have the personal protection or safety programs in place. So it's really important. We want to help you advise you through that and help you provide peace of mind, not only to provide a safer work environment, but also to, drive premium down and make it more appealing for our insurance carriers to commit to coverage and provide a quote for you guys.
I gotcha.
This would be kind of a very general high-level statement or question, but what are the carriers most interested in when it comes to looking at new policies? And the reason I'm asking is, I mean, somebody can put together an 800-page safety manual, and it looks really, really amazing on paper. Oh, yeah, every single thing possible is covered. But if nobody in the field's actually doing it, then it does no good at all. And I mean, I've seen it before, of course. Sometimes there's large GCs, especially, I'll say that they can do that kind of a thing. So what are the carriers really looking at to evaluate, the companies as far as their, what they're doing to make sure they're actually safe in the field?
Right. So our carriers do have loss control reps that will come out to job sites before even writing your account. So I have a couple right now that are prospects, and they have to have a job site visit from a loss control rep on the carrier side to make sure that, yes, they do have an 800-page safety manual put into place, but are they actually living up to it? When I walk into a manufacturing building and they say that they have sprinkler systems and they say that they have a really safe, clean floor plan, but they have 10 different leaks on the floor, open wiring on the wall, and a bunch of different hazards, that's what they're coming out to see and inspect. So they want to make sure there are loss control reps that will come out, and just to make sure that what we are saying as your broker or your representative to the carriers, they want to make sure that that is true and that is valid and that you have the safest working environment possible. Because at the end of the day, no one wants claims. They don't want claims because they don't want to have to pay them out. So they are taking a chance or the risk or taking every single type of the risk on your behalf if they are providing you a quote. So they want to make sure that we are operating as safe as possible to make sure that claims do not happen.
So I've got a question for you that I want to answer no matter what it is. I want to be able to take it and make it one of those little short videos and put it all over social media for everybody to see the answer, because I've seen all these rumors of like somebody, especially like smaller contractors, right? Some guy or maybe it's a social media girl that works in the office will come out at the job site, take pictures, right, and put them on Instagram or whatever, and if like blatant safety violations, right? Like some guy's like hanging off a ladder, installing something, or not wearing his PPE and all that. But then it's all fine, I guess. But then, somebody gets hurt and the insurance company starts scouring the social media and sees, well, we're not going to pay your claim because y'all are obviously an unsafe company. Look at all these pictures you're putting online. So how much truth is that?
That is very true. I have had a bunch of different accounts that have told me, yep, I have XYZ in our safety manual. We wear hard hats, we wear safety goggles, we wear the correct boots. And when we are up on ladders, we have the correct harnesses and everything put into place. But then when I say that and I type that in an email or over a phone conversation to one of our carriers, and then they go to their Facebook page, because that is a place that they check. So a big thing to note, make sure you clean up your Facebook page and your images and your websites. So when they go check that Facebook page and they see a guy hanging off a ladder holding up a peace sign with no harness on and is holding a bucket of paint, that is obviously not safe and a huge hazard. And they're going to say, yeah, no way are we going to provide coverage for this company because of that one picture. It happens all the time. So I guess a reminder for you guys, if you're going to tell your insurance company that you do wear harnesses, hard hats, and goggles, wear the harness, hard hats, and goggles, because we want you to be safe. We do not want claims to happen. But also they can deny coverage or not want to provide you guys a quote because they checked that Facebook page, saw the picture, and know that that's not true.
I've DM'd a few small contractors through Instagram and basically said, hey, I appreciate what you're doing. I like all your job site photos, but hey, this one, be careful. Like pictures like this, you're going to get yourself in trouble.
Yeah. And that's what we do too. As your broker working, our first interaction is something that I'll do is go look at the Facebook page and say, hey, before we even start this conversation, let's clean up your Facebook page. Let's get that peace sign picture off the internet. But let's also make sure that that doesn't happen when we're actually on the job site, because we do not want injuries to happen. And so it's important for your broker. It's important for you guys, safety wise. And it's also something that our carriers look at all the time.
Well, and that's a really good point, Matt, and thanks for bringing that up as well, because I mean I've dealt with it a lot as an owner's rep, not so much from the carrier side, but working with the owner on the sites. Is one of our contractors is standing at the very top of a ladder, and then somebody else walks by and takes a picture of it, and now it shows up in my email 30 minutes later, and I can't see who the contractor was, so I have no idea who to even go talk to in the field. But anyways, just going full circle to that culture and really enforcing the rules that you put into place. I mean, it's for the safety of the workers. It's not just for the policies or just to make the owners happy. I mean, there's a real reason behind it, and that's why the carriers look at it that way.
Right.
Speaking of just getting random pictures, during COVID, I was on a project site where everybody had to wear masks. And so I would get pictures and it'd be from 300 yards away. So one of the owners would zoom in. So it's all pixelated. All I see is a vest and I see somebody not wearing a mask. And I'm like, they're not wearing a mask. I'm like, I don't know who that, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
It was a fun time.
No, it was not.
Well, I want to ask a question kind of related to, kind of to this podcast. I mean, CM Mentors, construction, it's geared towards construction management, and especially the realms that Matt and I work in, owners, reps, and CM agents, et cetera. Personally, from my side, my business side, we've had a lot of issues sometimes working with carriers and getting the right policies in place, because a lot of times they don't understand the work that we're doing, because immediately you say construction. And this is not a carrier like company you work with that understands construction per se, but we say construction, they're immediately like, oh, we're not writing the policy, or we're not interested. It's like, well, hold on, I don't actually
think you're a contractor.
Right, contractor. I mean, I'm like, hold on, I don't actually do things. I work with the people that do, and I advise and I consult with the owners, but really the liability isn't
Al says, I don't do anything, so
I don't really do much of anything, to be honest. I mean, ask Alex and Morgan; they'll tell you. But no, I'm just very curious if you come across that often with carriers having issues, kind of maybe understanding what companies are doing as far as their real workload.
Right. I think that begins with your conversation with your broker, because we are a consultant on your behalf. So we need to understand each and everything that is coming your way, what you are dealing with, your day-to-day operations. And then if we are able to turn around and tell that story to our markets, Now, we have to have some grace with a lot of our markets because they have very strict appetites that come from high above and say, yeah, we absolutely cannot write project managers at all, no ifs, ands, or buts. And so there's a lot of carriers that have a specific market to not write those, but we do have some that will write them. So I think it's really important for your broker to understand your story and make sure that they understand. And then some of the times when you guys get denied coverage from a specific market, it's probably just because it's not within their appetite or you guys are not being represented accurately.
So this whole podcast is meant to be a resource to give back to the kind of the next generation coming up into the industry. Because like me and Kyle, when we got thrown into stuff, we're still trying to figure things out, all these years later. There's not a lot of mentorship out there. So if you were to give like a couple pieces of advice or one good piece of advice to, that kind of that fresh college graduate coming up into the construction industry related to insurance, what would it be?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would think in the construction space or project management space, it's all about safety, all centered around safety when in the eyes of insurance. So do as much training, programming. I don't know what it really looks like on your guys' end, like with the onboarding, but take it seriously and do the extra work that it takes to learn all things safety, learn all things operations. I think is my biggest takeaway with insurance and understanding, I guess, if you are obtaining insurance, then identifying what are the biggest exposures in your operations as well. What risks are we taking on with operating in these projects? Because if you can't accurately depict what you guys are doing or don't know where your exposures are, then you probably won't have insurance coverage in place. So I think just having the conversations and learning where your largest exposures are is also really important too.
I mean, I've seen contractors essentially go out of business overnight because they had a couple safety incidents. Their EMR went through the roof and they became basically uninsured or not even uninsured. Projects. They can't get projects because they have to have a safety under a certain level. So then it's like, well, no more, you're done.
Exactly. So it's super important. It's all centered around safety in our eyes in the insurance world.
Yeah, well, and especially for smaller businesses, that TRIR, recordable injury rate, the big factor of that is number of hours that you work and how big the staff is. And so a smaller company, I don't want to say is disadvantaged, but there's a huge disadvantage for those calculations. If you have even one incident, no matter how minor it is, that's recordable, it can really, like to Matt's point, put them off the map.
Exactly.
We're going to wrap us up, Kyle.
All right. Well, yeah. Anything? Any other last questions or anything else you want to add for the listeners here, Shea?
I think my last takeaway is insurance. Again, I know we kind of started this with a funny joke, but it's not what you guys love to talk about. It's expensive, and you're paying for something that you probably, hopefully, won't have to use. What we're here for is to help you prepare for the unexpected and put coverage in place in hopes that you won't have to use it. We don't want you guys to use it, and we want to help advise you to operate as safe as possible. But again, accidents happen, and we are here to put coverage in place and act on your behalf to restore the quality of life for your employees and your businesses for when accidents do occur. So it's really important to have a really good representative on your guys' side.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I will say too, just from experience, having a good broker agent can make your life a lot easier as well. Yep. Instead of asking you to fill out 30 forms, they can help you get the right information and maybe fill out only 5 forms.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, it can be a big pain sometimes. But
right.
But thank you so much, Shea. What's the best way for any listeners to get a hold of you if they want to bounce questions off you, start working with you, get some more information?
Yeah, so I can leave my phone number and email as well. LinkedIn, my name is Shea Fuller. That will also be below as well. So call, email, text, LinkedIn message, anything to get a hold of me. I'm always happy to help whenever needed.
You work coast to coast?
We do. Yep. All 50 states.
Cool.
Awesome. Very good. Well, thank you so much, Shea. It's been great having you. And that 55 minutes went by pretty fast. So
it did. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
And for all listeners out there, don't forget to get a hold of us as well. If you have any questions, don't forget to like, follow, share us. And looking forward to next one as well. So
next one will probably be Thanksgiving.
2025. Yeah.